into Through Dangers Untold, Chapter 12, The False Warnings. I'm your host as always, Owen Jones, and joining me, of course, is our resident Labyrinth expert, is, of course, the one and only Miss Emily Slade.
Hello!
Gets longer every week.
Yeah, I try and mix it up, but I can't remember what I've previously done, so I just wing it, and I probably it's probably quite consistent actually, knowing me, but I like to think it's different and fresh.
It is. That's a nice theatrical edge to the proceedings. Which is quite fitting tonight, because that's basically what it is all about. It's all about characters trying to out-theatrical each other.
Oh my god.
As we obviously move on from...
the greatest cinematic moment in cinematic history, yeah. Yep. We all remember it was iconic.
That's true. And now we're obviously into another of my favourite chapters, which is the False Warnings, who are essentially a group of talking stone heads whose only job is to provide false warnings. And this scene in particular is so great because it goes against so many fantasy tropes. Because normally when you wander into this sort of area, should we say, it's a group of characters who have no idea what the situation is. Where here within the Labyrinth, it's a situation where you're essentially seeing the inner workings. It's like a factory line what you're seeing, because Hoggle knows exactly what's going on. He knows what they're there to do. The false warnings know what they're there to do, and the fact that some of them are quite miffed at the fact that they've not been able to give their false warnings in quite a while, leading to a really bizarre conversation between Hoggle and the false warnings, as he just tells them to constantly shut up, and they're like, "Oh, come on, I haven't done it in quite a while."
Yeah, they're like old Shakespearean actors. They're like, "Please, I haven't said it in such a long time." And he's like, "Okay, but don't expect a big reaction." And then he's like, "Oh, no, of course not." It's so good. It's really fun. I didn't realize how long this chapter was. I thought it was just the false alarms bit, which is really, really fun. But there's more to it. But just to stay on the false alarms for a bit longer, like it's so memorable, even though it's so short. Like they're big stone faces etched into the wall, and when they open their mouths, all of this like rock dust falls out to sort of indicate how long it's been since they've actually opened their mouths. And you're like, do they talk to each other, or do they just sit there and do their job? Are they like a creature, or are they like rock that's been enchanted by Jareth? Do they only come to life when people are around, or do they just sit like minding their own business until someone turns up? Like, I don't know.
But they clearly have an idea.
What do you think?
They have this idea of a passage of time, clearly. So I would imagine that they're enchanted rock that's basically been put there just to mess with people. But because Hoggle's here, it's sort of like, it's like someone, like a workman being on the floor.
Yeah, it's like
it's
behind
sort of like,
the
he knows
scenes.
what's going.
It's like, come on, let's go this way. Like, okay, yeah, the trapdoor's going to open in 3, 2, 1. There you go. There's the trapdoor. Now let's go. And someone's like, "Oh, wow, how do you know that?" And he's like, "I work here. Like, it's my job to know that."
Yeah. And it's also with this scene that we get the real sort of actual sense of Hoggle warming up to Sarah, the way that he interacts with her. He's got an exuberance to his step.
He's been bribed by plastic, so
there is that, but he's someone who's clearly got a certain level of pride in his work. It's clearly one of his areas that he's been tasked with, other than the outside of the city. It would seem that he also handles the underworkings of the city as well.
Yeah, that's very true.
Because he's very familiar with where he's supposed to be going, unlike, which key opens the door.
The magic door.
But do you look at that size of that size of keys? It's just like a lot of areas that he's obviously responsible for.
Yeah, he's like the janitor of the labyrinth. Like, he knows everything. Yeah, it's a big responsibility.
And it's kind of like when people say, "Oh, well, how can you do a sequel to Labyrinth?" It's sort of like, it's this perfect movie. It's like, you look at that bag of keys, and it's like, what other doors do they open?
But also, let's not ever do a sequel to Labyrinth. Like, let's just not do that ever. It's not a thing. We don't want that. Thank you. Okay. But I hear you. A fun television series set within the world of the Labyrinth, perhaps, drawing on from inspiration from the manga sequel series. That, yes, we look at the other, we ignore Jareth and Sarah's storylines. Jareth is a faceless character that we only hear about, and then we delve into the other doors, and Hoggle's the main character. That's not a bad idea. I just like when you say Labyrinth and sequel in the same sentence, I get like hairs stand on edge. I'm like,
you want something like the old Star Wars fan movies, like Cheap Seats and Pink 5. These people are at these key moments, but they're just like minor players in the great scheme of things. So you basically want like some other dwarf who's been tasked with fixing things.
Like the intern.
Yeah.
Labyrinth intern.
Working his way up from the bottom, is sort of like he just runs home to his mum. He's like, "I got a job in the Labyrinth, Mom. I'm the guy who I'm the one who feeds the chickens to the troll."
Well, someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I'm going to be chief chicken handler. I could have
gone
so much worse.
Make sure to network. Try and get a conversation with the king. Yeah, Mum, I'll just do that, shall I? God, Mum.
Spend your days choking chickens.
Nice.
And I just
10% if you're going to make that into a thing. Thank you.
See, we're writing it here already. This thing writes itself. But yeah, I mean, as I say, this is what I love about Labyrinth compared to like other fantasy works, and the fact that it's not afraid to pull back the curtain, so to speak. With other ones, they're very sort of protective of like how everything works and everything is just the way it is, because there's fear that if you show something that's having like some sort of logical working,
and
that it removes the magic.
Yeah, and it's got this like fun comedicness to it, whereas like you never really see that in like Narnia, let's say. Like you never see a sort of behind the scenes. Narnia's very dramatic and high art, high fantasy, like very serious. It takes itself very seriously, does Narnia. Even when they literally have Father fucking Christmas, he's like some badass, like red-coated warrior man who's like, I defy the witch. I have made my way into Narnia because you, ultimate monarchy, exist, and blah, 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 blah. I just spilled my wine everywhere. But yeah, whereas in the Labyrinth, it's like, look, these guys are fun, and they haven't said this in a while, so just like let them, and it's gonna be really cute and fun, and Sarah's just like, all right. Whatever.
Do you think that because it had been a Henson project that we allow it to have such freedom? Because anything you watch with Henson, you just associate as being an extension of the Muppets. I mean, obviously Labyrinth is its own thing, but the humour and the way the puppets handle themselves are very...
The humour, it's all down to the humour. The reason Labyrinth is so iconic and brilliant is because it has that through line of humour. And this is what we're seeing in, like, other things that are becoming successful and popular. Like, I hear really good things about the new Suicide Squad because it's got a humour that apparently the original lacked. I don't know what I'm fucking talking about. I don't watch DC movies unless it's Wonder Woman. But, like, I'm a fucking liar. Batman Returns fucking slaps. But, you know what I mean. It's the comedy, it's the humour, it's that funny heart that runs all the way through it, and that's what Labyrinth has. It's because it's down to the Monty Python, the Terry Jones aspect as well, like combined with the Jim Henson comedy and heart. Like that's, the false alarms are very Monty Python. They're very British humour. And I think that's what's so great about the Labyrinth as well, is that classic British humour is present throughout, and we really, really see it in the false alarms.
Something I especially love as well with the false alarms, when he allows the last false alarm to do his bit, he actually warms up.
Yeah, he's like...
and goes into his dramatic thing. And he has a tonal shift, so I wondered if it was like just a bunch of like voice actors that they had.
Like improvising.
Which obviously makes sense.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's not just he goes straight, he's just like uses the same voice. Instead, he's sort of like, no, warm up. I'm gonna compose myself for this big performance. And then he's
fun.
like,
it's so fun.
The conversation trails off in the background as we're moving on.
Yeah, it's so clever. Like we spot the crystal that's just come around the corner as he's like, thank you very much, because we've listened to his like performance. But already, like, the action's moved on because Jennifer Connelly's like, uh-oh, and Hoggle's like, oh, no, and we see a crystal ball and we're like, fuck yeah, this can only mean one thing, costume change. Now, technically, if we want to be super specific, there's 2 new costumes that Jareth wears in this scene, because there's the disguise and then the costume he's wearing underneath. The costume he's wearing underneath is one we have not seen yet. It is a combination of some very nice tight grey pants, which have a sort of snakeskin aesthetic to them once you get up close, which, we do in this scene. And then a really nice high-collared brown leather jacket over a froofy pirate shirt. Mwah! Great belt as well. Big hair. It's iconic. It's like his day wear. It's like just like standard classic. Like, I'm just going to wear this while I mooch around the labyrinth kind of wear. But originally he's in his sort of like Muppet disguise, where he's almost literally holding a puppet in front of him to have the initial conversation. Very famous quotes in this little scene, like it's sort of forgettable because it's bookended by so much more iconic things, and like, you know, everybody knows Magic Dance, but people may not forget the False Alarms chapter. But it's so good. It's like in the Phantom of the Opera, there's a song called Twisted Every Way / Notes, or Notes / Twisted Every Way, and it's brilliant. And it's right before Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again, and Christine's in her blue dress, and it's just a really great piece of music. It's very dramatic. It's a good opportunity for the actors to show off their like skills, and it's just really, really fun. And it's often forgotten because it's bookended by Masquerade and Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again, which are huge, but it's so good, and it's my favorite part of the whole thing. And watching this, I was like, my God, I think this is my favorite part of the whole thing, obviously besides the door, the broom cupboard door. But it's just everything about this movie that I love, and I'm sure other people agree, where you've got Jareth in disguise, and then he unveils himself, and he's incredibly sexy. And they've got some wordplay where they can't get Hoggle's name right, and it's so funny. Like, it's just classic comedy. You've got him like leaning against the wall in a way that I'm like, if anyone ever does this to me in real life, I will marry them. And then you enter the world and people start doing it, and you're like, oh, actually, no, this is incredibly predatory and creepy. Please stop. But in the movies, it's nice. And the chemistry between Connolly and Bowie come forth. His character is he's in like fucking high drama mode, where he's all like, oh, do tell, like, what, oh, and like Hoggle's like, oh no, I was leading her back to the beginning, and Bowie immediately looks at like Sarah to see what her reaction is, like, what do you think of that, Sarah? Then he does the fast forwarding of the clock, so she loses hours. She claims it's not fair, which we now know is her catchphrase. But again, almost meta, he like calls her out on it with the iconic line, you say that so often, I wonder what your basis for comparison is. And as he says that, he's like pure sex, like just pure unadulterated, just like oh, before that, we've had a huge close-up of his trousers, where Hoggle falls to his knees and begs him not to, like, put him in the bog of eternal stench. So again, we're planting the bog of eternal stench. We know that this is a bad place, but it's the first time we hear of it. We have a very nice close-up of his groin. We get to see the detail in his trousers. It's great. It's great. It's just so good. And then it ends with him summoning the cleaners, which is what we'll go on to talk about next chapter. But it's just a lovely, iconic dialogue between the trio. It's really fun, it's funny, and it's like so sexy. And it's the first time that Jareth has come to speak to Sarah since he sort of dropped her into the labyrinth, like face to face. And she is doing an excellent job. Jennifer Connelly is making such good choices as an actor when he comes up to her and he is like so attractive and he's leaning on the wall and I just love him so much. He's so attractive. He's so hot. And he's like, how are you finding my labyrinth? And like, she's so good to hold her own, and she makes this brilliant choice of, like, looking down and then coming back up and staring him in the eye and being like, it's a piece of cake. And then we get Hoggle's brilliant reaction of, like, fucking hell, you shouldn't have said that. And it's just a really neat, fun little scene that I really, really enjoy, and, like, sums up everything that's so much fun about Labyrinth, I think. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Great. Okay, so let's just rewind a little bit. Now, Jareth obviously he's introduced again via the Skin Muppet costume, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And when he removes it, he gives it a twirl. So he's like, a theatrical entrance. That he's the bullfighter sort of stance that he's taking. His hands are pretty much on his hips, if not physically, it's mainly metaphorical. The way he flails that cape around, he is like commanding. He's announcing himself, as Jareth basically likes to do. He's a very theatrical villain.
Yeah.
And certainly when his introduction, you can tell in his head, he's got it worked out exactly what he's going to be doing. All the time he's been sitting there, he's been like thinking himself like, okay, they're going to come here, and I'm going to do that flourish thing, and then I'm going to go into the intimidation stance and like be this cocky little bastard that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead, you get the expression, especially the impression, especially from Bowie's expression, because he's interrupted partway through his opening sort of monologue where he sort of like notices Hoggle's bracelet, and he recognizes it as being plastic, and he's sort of like, "What are you doing? What is this cheap tacky thing? You're throwing the whole thing off here, man." And
yeah, it's like he already knew, and he just like bided his time to be like, what is that plastic thing round your, like, I know that she's duped you and you're blah blah blah, and it's all just for the drama. Like, he is 100% here for the drama. He's like, I'm sorry, I thought you took a bribe from Sarah. And he's like, what, a bribe? No, I didn't take a bribe. No, I was gonna take it back to the beginning. And then he's like, haha, Sarah, what do you think about that? And she's like, you were what? And he's like, Hoggle, what have you got to say to that? And he's just like, it's just a massive drama queen, and I'm here for it.
But you look at that, and that's really his way of regaining control of the situation. Because he was so sure Hoggle is very much under his thumb that he's not going to go against him. And yet here Sarah is, oh, sweetness and light, charming even a grumpy old Hoggle into like helping her for the labyrinth. And the fact that he's given her this symbol of friendship between them. And it's something that he very clearly is quite fond of, because we see him like look back at it on a number of occasions, like in the film. And the fact that Bowie's performance here is just so key to the scene working. The fact that you're taken on such a journey, because before it would just be sort of like, oh, I'm introduced, look how threatening I am. Look, I'm disgusted at Hoggle because you're potentially betraying me. And instead with Bowie's, it's like this whole journey. We're getting this feeling that someone here is going for a real journey themselves of like how they're dealing with the situation, because clearly in his mind, everything, he's like stacked the deck so much that everything's going to go according to plan. And so far, Sarah's basically been going the way that he thought that she would be going. And now, obviously, this has thrown a whole spanner in the works. And the fact that he's now realised that he's got one of his own people is helping her. And worse still, someone who actually knows the inner workings of the labyrinth.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like that's why he has to like pull out the big guns. It's like, what's Hogglebush afraid of? The bog of eternal stench. And this is why he's like, I'm going to throw you headfirst into that bog if you don't get back in line.
Yeah.
And you see that Hoggle himself, he's not quite sure. He's like, he feels a certain amount of confidence that Sarah gives him, so that he's like willing to stand up to him to an extent, but at the same time, he's also still quite a bit of a coward. We've seen him like drop to his knees. He's in that very sort of submissive pose where he's right beside Jareth's crotch, and it's very hard to miss because he's only a dwarf. And he's there. He's grabbing hold of his leg. He's like, "No, no, no! Don't throw me in the bog. I'll be good." And Jareth like basically goes back. He sees that he's like regains the control of the situation, and returns to scream with Sarah. Hence the whole shaving time off, because that's quite a dastardly thing to do. Um, and it's their relationship is so weird. It's
Who,
sort of like
Hoggle and Jareth, or Jareth and
no,
Sarah?
Jareth and Sarah is the fact he's just so tormenting here.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's something that I feel like I need to give more thought to properly at some point, because it's something that a lot of people enjoyed, in the sense that they would put themselves in Sarah's place and really enjoy the fact that Jareth was in love with them. Like, all you want when you're a kid is that someone to be so desperately in love with you that they'll literally rearrange time for you. Like, that's like the dream back in the 2000s, especially before we had, aspirations, because we were women and we weren't allowed any. And but then you grow up and you read about how there are allegations that David Bowie himself was very interested in younger women, like underage women, and it's on the DVD. I really remember watching the behind the scenes where David Bowie is like, not only is Jennifer Connelly an incredibly attractive young lady, but she's very talented, and it always stood out to me as like, that was a weird thing to say. Like, that was a bit strange. Like, he really pushes how hot she is, and she's like 15 at the time, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that was a bit weird. And it's a whole thing. And then, of course, like, I showed this to my friends when I was older, who had never seen it before, and were very much like, he's predatory, this is creepy, you're not meant to be on his side, like, you're not meant to find him attractive, like, he's very, very creepy, and she's very, very young, and I have a lot of problems with that coming to this as an adult. So it's really interesting how I think there's a real conversation to be had about what's taught, what's learned, what's genuine desire and interest, what's right, what's wrong. Yeah, it's interesting, is what I'll say about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that as well. Obviously, this is the 80s. There is, unfortunately,
I mean, there
a
still
lot of
is
things
huge
that
age gaps between men and women in movies, but not ever so starkly. This is a child who is babysitting their stepbrother, and you are an ancient immortal king. Like,
yeah.
And it's very fantasy-esque, it's the idea was that, Romeo and Juliet, she was 13, he was 16. Like, there was always this idea of like age gaps between men and women, and men always having to be older, and it wasn't unheard of that you would be sent off as a bride of 14 to an old man, which I think wasn't strictly true, but it's definitely become something that we believe to have been true, to the point where we're kind of okay with it. I don't know. I don't really know enough about what I'm talking about to have like a true opinion, but I think it's interesting and warranted as a conversation with perhaps someone that knows what they're talking about.
I wonder if I like the idea, though, that do we accept him more because Bowie isn't a human man? He's a fantastical being. As in his character, not what Bowie is. But
I know what you mean.
That could be odd for them both.
If he was like a mermaid or a dragon, would we still be chill with it? Like if we think that he's the age of like King Triton, and then King Triton tried to get with a mermaid that was the same age as his daughter, like, would everyone be freaked out, or would everyone be chill about it because they're mermaids?
And we also have like our love interest in Lord of the Rings, which we were randomly talking about before we came there tonight. And I mean, she's an mortal elf. She's hundreds of years old.
Yeah, and he's only like
about that
800.
because it's like. So,
yeah, because she doesn't look older, and I think that's the thing. Like, David Bowie is clearly 40, and Jennifer Connelly is clearly like 15. But I do hear you, and I think in fantasy it's more accepted, especially romantic fantasy, Arthurian legends, that sort of thing. Yeah, I think it is more the aesthetic and as on top of stuff as well.
And I also think also because of the 80s, there was a lot of this. I mean, you had John Hughes and Molly Ringwald, who apparently had a thing going on. Apparently, Molly Ringwald was on Mark Maron's WTF podcast, and she was like saying it's all like, oh yeah, if we weren't seeing people at the time, I'm sure something would have happened between us. And it's like just gone from being like, oh yeah, Molly Ringwald was Hughes's muse to no, there was something else going on there, and there's a massive age difference. I mean, she's a child.
Yeah, this is the
And he
thing.
tried
I
to.
really reject the use of the. I really hate when it's like muse. Like, I hate the term muse because it always just conjures up like Lolita imagery to me, where it's like a muse is an underage girl bringing inspiration to a wizened old man. And I know that's not where the term comes from. I know it's the Greek for like a type of angel that would bring creativity to whoever.
Yes.
But it's always, you think muse, you think John Hughes and Molly Ringwald. You think like old man, young girl. You think artists, you think actresses to directors. You think like it just like very rarely have I don't think I can think of an example, and that there's bound to be them, but they're just not in the public consciousness of a young man being amused to an older woman, or even just people the same age, or like just a man being amused to a woman creator. Like, you just don't hear it in the same way. So when you think of the word muse, you just think like, I don't know, pedophilia. I don't know, like.
I know what you mean. It's that, or I think of oh, I'm trying to think of a freaking name now. Oh, this is so frustrating. The chick who was in Dust Till Dawn, and you think of Salma Hayek in
yeah.
Dogma.
Oh yeah,
She was a
yeah. I
muse.
was gonna say that.
She was a muse who was sick of not getting credit, and then got
Yeah.
writer's block.
I love it. Where she's like, the top 10 highest grossing movies of all time, they're all me. Oh, except that one with the kid at Christmas. The home invasion. I had nothing to do with that.
Someone had to sell their soul to save it for that piece of shit.
Yeah. So good. So good, because it's already been established that John Hughes is like a major influence to two of the main movies in that. Yeah, I got it. I got the reference.
Dogma would be one that I would love to do a chapter by chapter breakdown. There's just so much depth in that movie.
Well,
Brilliant.
You say that. I did it recently. I did it around this time last year for a Kevin Smith-a-thon.
Yeah.
In a network I was in, and I fucking lived for that movie when I was a teenager. Like, I watched it all of the time. And I watched it with my friend Flo, who'd only ever seen it like once in an RE lesson. And upon a rewatch, I was like, oh, this is like laddie teenage humor. It was confusing. I wasn't quite sure what sort of message it had. It was very fun, but it was very much like, what are you trying to say here? And like, I get what you're trying to say here, but you're just doing it in such a bizarre way. There was a whole scene that was fucking pointless and a waste of time. Like, there was just a lot that wasn't as fondly remembered upon a rewatch. As not disappointing, but eye-opening. And I was just like, oh, that's a shame.
It's a shame.
I liked it when I was 15 because I didn't know any
still
better.
like it.
Yeah,
I still like it, and
there's a lot of fun stuff, and I remember it really, really fondly. But yeah, it was interesting.
I remember first time I watched it, my dad was like working on the computer or something, and George Carson's like giving his buddy Christ.
Buddy Christ, doesn't he just pop?
And he was still like, "What is this? This is so random." It's like, Jesus didn't come down here to give us the heebie-jeebies. He came here to give us a boost.
And this is the thing, I feel like it was possibly one of the first of its kind that not poked fun at religion, but opened up a conversation about it in a really fun way. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I fucking love Ben Affleck and Matt Damon in these roles. I think they're brilliant.
I know you're just like talking about it. I just want to do quote after quote.
It's so quotable. It's so quotable.
It's like, don't look at me like that. People think I broke up with you or something. Or, I fucking miss my cartoons for this.
It was so good, and I loved Bethany as a character, and I still do. I think she's such a great character.
Oh yeah, it's sort of like you got that, and you got Alan Rickman as
Oh
the
God.
Viper, and
I
you've
did
got
her
Lance
monologue. I would
Morissette's
take her
God.
monologue to auditions when I was still auditioning as an actor, before the pandemic.
Yeah,
I would do her monologue that she says on the train about how, like, what God has a plan. What about my plan? Like, it's such a good monologue.
yeah.
So much fun. It's a great movie. No
Um,
ticket. So good.
I think Jason Mewes for that one. He was determined because Kevin Smith was like, we've got Alan Rickman and all this. He's an English actor. They invented acting. He's like, you can't be
No, we
dicking around on
didn't. The
this.
Greeks invented acting.
I know, but the Americans who think we invented acting, I'm not going to question them. And like he was like Jason, he was like not only memorized his own lines, but like the whole script.
Aww.
Because like before, like Kevin Smith would like have to give him prompts, and as the films had gone on, he got better.
Yeah.
And he was like going for the script. It's like, what, you suddenly become Rain Man or something? It's so like, oh yeah, you said that English guy was here, and I really wanted to show him up.
Aww.
So,
It's so much fun. And obviously
of
God is a girl.
course,
God
and the
is
last
a
noise there,
girl.
and
Whatever
Canadian.
you want. Can you
Um,
believe it? Can you receive it? God is a girl. Whatever you say. It's great.
anything else you want to talk about this scene at all?
Let me check my notes. What have I got down here? New outfit, false alarms, Bowen Connolly, Dick Bulge, Hoggle hilarious. I think I've covered everything.
So, Jareth obviously, nothing he's quite intimidated Sarah enough, and the fact she first back is like, it's that piece of cake. And then, of course, in true villainous fashion, he turns to it's like, oh really? How about you deal with this little slice?
Slice.
Throws the globe into the
Mwah.
dark, and then
Perfect.
we see the cleaner.
Oh
And,
no.
and
It's
then
the
the pair of them run off,
cleaners.
and if you got your stereo turned up just enough, you would hear Joffrey Connolly go, "Come on, feed!"
Love it.
That concludes tonight's episode. Thank you as always for listening. Thank you to my co-host Emily.
Thank you. I love this episode. It's really underrated, I feel. Like, not that a lot of people talk about Labyrinth around me, but, like, when they do, they don't specifically mention the scene, and I think they should more, basically, is what I'm saying.
Awesome. As always, if you want to follow us, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram. Come and say hello to us. Click the like and subscribe button wherever you happen to be listening to us. Leave us a review, because it all helps raise the profile of the show.
Genuinely, like, just, like, get in touch. Like, I will have conversations about this movie until the cows come home. And the cows never come home, so basically the conversation never ends, so hit me up.
But thank you as always for listening. Thank you. And we will be back with our next chapter, The Cleaner.
The Cleaners!
But until then, thank you as always for listening, and we'll be back very soon. Good night.
Bye!